firmly believe that abortion is child sacrifice. I don't think it's anything less than that. If you look at what the pagans and the Mayans did, for example, the Mayans, they had like stone hands that were shaped like this, and they put a fire underneath it, and that is where you would sacrifice your baby to have a better life. And what does everyone always say? I needed to do this to what? Have a better life. I couldn't have a baby because I could not have this. I could not get my career. It's always sacrificing your child to have a better life. And so everything that we're seeing when it comes to abortion, and this is one of the topics I'm most passionate about because I have a child and it just makes me sad. But when it comes to abortion, this is quite literally just, Satan is loving this, being able to destroy what the author of life creates. That,
the ultimate
children,
evil.
Life, God creates that. If he's able to eradicate that, it's bliss for him. He's enjoying this a lot.
Let's go!
Well, Brianna, welcome to the show. I found you on your journey near the beginning. I was telling Chris that I saw you for the first time. You had about 7,000 followers. I feel like I got my foot in the door. I'm not going to lie, because right after that, you had a meteoric rise, which is amazing. Congrats to you for that, for sure. And I was like, man, I'm glad I DM'd her back before she was sub 10K, because now she knows.
It's crazy now.
Right? Yeah. I can't imagine what your DMs look like, because I have almost 8K followers, and my DMs every day, there's like 50 people when I wake up that send me something or ask me a question. And I saw your post where you were like, hey guys, I can no longer answer all of these DMs. Like, I'm sorry, Yeah, so I can't imagine. But I will say this. I have enjoyed everything that you have done. I also will say that I remember the first time that I was impressed with something that you said. And the thing that impressed me was your mention of Marxism. This is not a topic that a lot of people in my age group spend a lot of time talking about. I think that Marxism has become almost synonymous with just communism, and then communism has been turned into a trope, especially for a generation of people who grew up on Russians as the bad guys in movies, right? And so communism has sort of lost its meaning in a lot of different ways until, I would say, at least the last 10 years, and then especially the last 5 or 6. And so when you said that, I was impressed, because I was like, well, good for you, right, for diagnosing something the way it should be. And this is a topic that Chris and I spent a lot of time talking about. It's something that I've pushed a lot of literature on people to read about, and has its roots in way more things than people even realize. And to be honest, a lot of people can't even define what it actually means. So just wanted to say kudos to you, and you having the intellect to talk about something like that. And I'm curious, I guess first question for you would be, where did you begin learning about what Marxism is, or is this something maybe you grew up with, right? You had a parent who made you read a lot. What happened there?
So I first heard about Marxism actually through Thomas Sowell. I don't think a lot of people realize that Thomas Sowell was a Marxist for a long time, actually. And I first started learning about it through him. And then I think, when you start entering intellectual circles, you start hearing about the Communist Manifesto. So I read the Communist Manifesto, and I started learning more about how Marxism is a socioeconomic theory that ends up connecting to communism. It's kind of like you have affirmative action, and then DEI is affirmative action in action. So Marxism is the theory, and communism is Marxism in action, almost always. Socialism ends up taking from it. But Marxism is something that it's a term that I started seeing get thrown around a lot, and people don't really know what it means, kind of like fascist, Marxist, Nazi, all the things, but they don't really know what it means. And so when you actually look into what it means, you see it almost directly correlate with what's happening on the left right now, especially when it comes to what's happening with Mamdani and Islam and all of these kind of just trying to get rid of any other adversary and make it so that we just have one centralized government. And what happens and what turns it into communism is you can't have that centralized government without a goal and without a theory and without an ideology. And so when it ends up taking over and there's no opposition, that's when you're left with a Marxist communist government. And we're seeing a lot of that in New York right now.
I think you defined what the praxis of it is really well, like you said, right? It's the theory in practice. Praxis is that. I think a lot of people forget or don't know either that capitalism and communism are connected insofar as communists view communism as the end stage after capitalism has collapsed. Because capitalism is what builds the infrastructure, right? The means of production that once the revolution happens is seized, and then you have the communist utopia. A lot of people forget that actually, there's a step-by-step process, a step-by-step idea of how we get to this point. And they all believe essentially that capitalism is meant to be and will wind up in communism eventually. And it's what drives the idea that the issue is never the issue is the revolution, because everything is about getting to that and getting beyond capitalism. Capitalism is greed. There's not going to be any greed. It's like a John Lennon song. We will all own nothing and everything at the same time and be happy. And the other thing that you had said about a goal and an ideology. One thing that is a trait of this too is the eradication of traditional values, traditional values, yes, but tradition in general, because different groups of people have different traditions, and those traditions jut up against one another, and they prevent this unity essentially. And so what happens is anytime you enter these ideas into a community of people, the first thing they go after are traditions because they see them as a form of oppression. And this is really the impetus of all of it, is that there's an oppressor and oppressed system. Everything is viewed this way. And it's boiled down to identity and not individual, right? So who you are as your identity is more important than who you are as a person and as an individual. And that's what all of this has come down to. Why, when you said Islam just now, that's a perfect example of it. You are a Muslim before you are anything else, right? You cannot be an individual there. You're seeing the Iranians revolt right now, trying to throw off what they've dealt with, which is a Muslim theocracy dictatorship for a long time. And the left has now become so synonymous with those values, they don't even realize it, and they think that they are still espoused with traditional American values. And then the other thing you talked about a lot is the woke right. And these people are sort of devolving as well into collectivism, and they're meeting on the fringes of one of these things, both sides of this. And this is the big problem we're facing now. And I texted you when you asked me about what we were going to talk about. And Chris and I have been kicking around this idea of, it's normal to have a fringe group of people who you're just never going to see eye to eye with. But it's now become such a rooted part of the American community that you can't not notice it anymore, and you have to deal with it. It's not the person over there, it's so many others. And it's what's going on in Minnesota right now. It's what's going on in Washington and Oregon with ICE and all these other things. So these people are dangerous, and not to say that they are dangerous in the way that they're going to physically hurt somebody, but this idea is dangerous because it destroys what was there that kept us all together, thinking that we're going to wind up in this sort of utopian state once the revolution is successful, and then we don't even think about all of the tertiary problems that are going to come with that. And at the end of this, I'm going to wind up sewing pink and purple buttons on the new Red Army outfits, and everything is going to be great, right? So anyway, I saw you had something to say, Chris.
I was just going to add on to what you were talking about. Let me back up to the top, which is I really like the way that you described it, Brianna. I thought you did a really good job in it, because one of the things that makes Marxism so pernicious is because it's a theory, and then as soon as you can introduce it into, let's say, the educational system, or start passing anything through it, it becomes like the glasses through which you see the world. So your paradigm's forever colored by it. And so in the same way that a fish doesn't realize it's wet, right? Young kids don't realize that you're being indoctrinated to look through this lens, and it's the way that you're going to see everything, and you can't like undo it like once it's been seeded in. And I thought you did a really good job of putting that out. And while you were going, Brandon, I was just thinking that one of the other lies that sometimes just like it's so subtly baked into the cake that it kind of gets forgotten. But this idea of like oppressor versus oppressed class, one of the other presuppositions that comes with it is that it's the amount of power that a person has that gives them their inherent value. And so it's like if you have less power than another person, then you are inherently less valuable than another person. And that's just simply not true, right? Like through a Christian worldview, we would say, I'm talk about the Bible maybe a little too much, but in the idea that Jesus said, right, like if like those who are to be first, if you want to be first, you will make yourself last, right? And the Bible talks about servant leadership and all this stuff about making yourself low and humble. And it kind of turns that whole idea on its head of like, just because you don't have power, like you're no less valuable to God, right? But like through the Marxist lens, this is why everything has to be viewed like that, oppressor oppressed, is because it's like, look, they have power, or they have wealth, or they have this thing, education. Yeah. You don't. You are now less valuable than them, because of it.
Because of your point there is exactly why Marx places inherent value in labor. He says that everybody's labor has the same value, right? Which is not true. Because if that was true, then the WNBA would be just as valuable as the NBA. I think that's a fair reference, just saying.
Well, the WNBA gets its value from the NBA.
Exactly.
Who pays for the WNBA?
Right.
Yeah.
So their labor, playing games and practicing and all of that, is not as inherently valuable, right? Monetarily as the NBA. But that's why Marx assigns labor as this inherent value, this inherent property about you, that your labor is going to be valuable. If you're making something nobody wants, right? Like your time is valuable, the debt you're paying to your life is valuable, but what you're making is not valuable. So therefore your labor is not valuable. So that's the big fault there with this idea that everybody is inherently valuable based on their labor. And there's two things I wanted to say to walk this back. You'd mentioned before that Thomas Sowell was a Marxist in his life, and you'd asked me before about how you thought that this ideology has permeated and then now deep-seated inside our culture. I think that's the perfect example, because this ideology behaves like a predator and then a parasite. Young black men, especially in his age, were very much dealing with all of the civil rights issues of their age. They were a community of people who were a lot more impoverished and targeted and directed hate at all the time from a very, very, very deep-seated and purposeful, like, socioeconomic way. And anybody dealing with something like that, anybody poor, right, is very, very susceptible to ideology and being preyed on. And not to hate on my recruiters out there, but that's why recruiters like poor kids so much, because you can get in their head and say, right, here's all these things the Army or the Air Force can offer you, and you can convince people of these things, right? And so that's sort of how this began to spread in the United States, and this sort of subculture of groups that would form up as it's almost like mafioso in a way, right? There's the Black Panthers. This is deep-seated Marxism that exists in there, and a lot of these other groups, right? And these ideas spread. Well, like the Weather Underground is a group of people that we've talked about quite a bit. Bill Ayers is most notably one of the members of the Weather Underground. Are you familiar with the Weather Underground? Brianna?
Yes, I am.
Okay, right. And so, like, Angela Davis is another member of it. These people are quite literally domestic terrorists who found their way from being young, impressionable college kids into being college professors and in part of the educational institution of this country. And they went from believing this stuff and being activists and domestic terrorists in their young life to becoming professional domestic terrorists and professional ideologues. That's what happened. That's how this has happened. You're waging information warfare, and you don't even have to fire a shot because you're creating an entire generation of people who are now your army. And so it's like siege warfare, right? Siege warfare, you can either decide you're going to attack the castle or you're going to surround it and you're going to wait it out. And that's what this is. It's Rudy Duchka's long march through the institutions. We're going to embed ourselves, lie about who we are. Once we get there, we're going to change the processes from the inside. And they've done that over the past 50, 60 years of being institutionalized and then finally making it into leadership positions and then driving all this postmodernist crap from the Frankfurt School, you know, Marcuse and all this. And we wound up in a spot where really like millennials are really the first generation that sort of embraced this to its core from the beginning. And I really blame my generation for a lot of these problems, quite frankly. We are like self-haters for some reason. I don't understand it. But that's how that happened. That's why we're dealing with this, is because of those people believing this crap, essentially, and then making their way into everything, the education system, which, of course, you get a job and you learned all through college that you're being oppressed constantly. You go out, you have a family, you get a job, you make friends, you have kids, you teach it at home. It's just that's the natural process. That's how that happened. That's what I would say how that happened. I don't know about you guys, but
yeah, I mean, education is exactly how you infiltrate the minds of the youth, who then end up entering the workforce, who then end up having children, and it becomes this long generation of people that firmly believe they're oppressed. And of course, in the Black community, I can directly relate to that. Just this idea that we are oppressed no matter what, and we must receive from whites in order to get ahead. And what I find so interesting about that thought process is I don't think people understand colonization wasn't just the physical implications that came from it. There's also the psychological that's left behind.
Yeah.
And so this idea, this inferiority complex that's left behind from it, this idea that we need to receive from the government, from white people, from everyone else in order to get ahead is the issue. And it keeps us poor and it keeps us dependent. And so when you talk about keeping people poor people being the easiest to use, the most vulnerable part of society, it's easy to make them believe that if we just had one central government where everyone made the same amount of money and everyone got the same things, that's perfect. Because then you're convinced that, and then on top of that, you're convinced that people that are rich are the problem. They're not the goal, they're the problem. Who wants a freedom to choose when I can just choose to be mediocre, to be inferior, and I can just receive instead of getting to that upper tier, to that upper place. And so let's just remove all the capitalists, which we've all been conditioned through CRT and through our education system are the worst parts of society. They don't support the economy. They don't provide jobs. They don't do anything like that. No, they are the enemy. And we can just have this central government that revolves around this ideology that keeps me comfortable, keeps me feeling like it's okay to be down here. I'm down here because of everyone else, not myself. And it creates this dangerous ideology. And the reason why it's so dangerous, honestly, we can look at what just happened in Minnesota, that girl that just got killed. Ideology is what did that to her. This idea that I have the right to go after these cops and after these people because this is my duty. This is the social justice that I need to live my life through. She's been conditioned to think that she, as a white woman, needs to protect all of these people because without her, all of these terrible things are going to happen to all of these people. And it's her duty to do it. And not only is that ideology inherently racist, considering you're implying that without your whiteness, I cannot exist, but it's also implying that it's her job to do things like that. And that's not what you're supposed to do. And it puts you in a dangerous spot. And so the reason why I think that with conservatism, people feel so threatened by the idea of it is the fact that you are seeing the people that you need to keep divided in order for this ideology to persist get along. You're seeing us get along. You're seeing us actually cooperate with each other. You're seeing us have the same ideology, and it doesn't revolve around this idea of oppression. Because if people don't feel oppressed, if people don't stay poor, if people are not dependent on them, then honestly, what do they have? They feed off of the idea of being poor, hating this group of people, loving yourself just for existing as if being black is an achievement, and and just proceeding that way through life. And so it all stems from oppression and this idea of oppression. And if we keep it, people like to think that the idea of keeping capitalists away is going to make it so that we prosper. But in reality, the reason so many people are not thriving is being conditioned to believe that they're oppressed, and that's why they're not achieving anything in life. And it's honestly really sad to see the amount of people that don't live up to their potential because they don't think it's attainable without government intervention. And we're not a country that's built to have government intervention. If you look back in history, Thomas Sowell talks about it all the time, how when you look back in history, the only time where things started falling apart is where we had endless government intervention. When we don't intervene and we repair ourselves, that's when we thrive. So I think it's important that we start getting back to that.
Yeah, they want government to replace opportunity. That's what they want. Replace it with handouts
100%.
instead. Yeah.
It's so funny because you were talking just last night, Brandon, about the mayor of New York pulling that stunt where he wanted to go see the capitalist apartments that were
slums.
supposedly
Right.
that were falling apart. He walks in and he's pointing out all these problems. And then it turned out it's like, no, those are the
He's in the projects.
Those are state-owned buildings.
Yeah.
You're in the projects. Yeah.
That is a classic Marxist tactic. That is something called agitprop.
Exactly what it looks like.
Propitation.
This is what it looks like when the government intervenes and you stay dependent. That's honestly what he just showed you. This is what it looks like when you live off the government. Congratulations.
Well, if you notice, one of the first things they did after they cut from him pulling up the tile on the floor and looking at all the mildew in the bathroom was the first question he asked the tenant was, "Have you called the landlord about this? What did the landlord say?" Oh, and she gave some answer basically about how she called but nothing happened. I was like, that's it right there. That's who we're blaming, the landlord, right? This is government-owned housing. This person is an employee of that government housing, and we're not saying that. We're just implying his worth based on his class and his title of landlord, and he's not taking care of it, right? So the elite class isn't taking care of the poor class who's living in this very degraded apartment building that they're basically have no other choice to live in, and they're not being taken care of. That's the point. That's agitation and propaganda. Agitprop. It's a old Soviet word. But the other point you said, you brought up critical theory, and I like that you brought up critical theory because one of the fixtures of critical theory is that no one can agree on what it actually means, right? Not everybody agrees what critical theory is, and it's on purpose. And the reason that it's on purpose is because it allows for a constant total interpretation of what that means, right? And therefore, any new idea that gets introduced into it is open to be torn down. It's not principles inherently at all. It's a hodgepodge of whatever it is we're temporarily agreeing on. This is why the left eats themselves so often, because they get so caught up in one thing, and this is the cause, right? Right now the cause is this woman in Minneapolis, who, by the way, today the bridge that goes over the highway for UC Davis near where I live already had stuff all over it for this person. I just want to say. So the other part of this too is that the normal people who don't believe in critical theory, right? They can never actually grasp what it actually means, and that is also on purpose. It's dual-edged here. The people involved in it can never understand what it means, and that's on purpose because they can continue to identify issues to place them in to begin dismantling them. And if the people who don't understand it, right, or try to, then they just don't understand that they didn't get it right because they didn't engage in it properly. And that introduces the other idea that there's an elite class, right? So there's the bourgeois, there's the vanguard, and there's the proletariat. This idea of the vanguard is the elite few who truly understand the praxis of this, and we're the ones that you guys need in order to get this right. And it it staples right back into what you were talking about with these white people who believe that black people need them to survive.
The white savior complex, we can put it that way.
Exactly. They see themselves as a vanguard of an ideology that, even though you exist as a black conservative, right, you're just not engaging in this properly enough. You will always be on the outside of it, and you need me in practice to be that person so everybody else can understand, even though I can't tell you how your black experience is because I'm white, but I'm going to, because I'm the vanguard here. You are the proletariat. And you see how, like, we've taken this now and pushed it all the way through this fucking lens that they try to understand things through, and it still makes no sense. That's a feature, right? That's not a symptom. It's a feature of this.
And that's why I'll never be on the left again, because, I mean, the overt and obvious racism in that white savior complex is literally how they survive. Hating white people while at the same time often marrying them, but also like, I feel like AOC and all of them, they're married to white men, yet they talk shit about white men all the time.
Don Lemon,
but what I will
to a
say,
white man.
it's actually insane. But when it comes down to it, they cannot survive without the opposition. There's no unity there, and honestly, the only thing they can unite under is what they hate. That's it. Who and what is there to hate today? And it's honestly really, really sad to watch. Chris, I think you were about to say something.
Oh, you didn't have to hand it off to me like that. I was just, in my mind, I was thinking about what Brandon said earlier about how it comes in like a predator and then becomes a parasite, which is exactly like what you were describing. And then as you were talking earlier, Brandon, I was thinking about almost the religiosity of it.
Correct.
Because like in the early periods of the church, right, like just after Jesus died, obviously you have the apostles and they're writing the early books, and they're writing them to the people at the time in the languages that they understood. But then as the Bible started getting translated into Latin and Greek, like later on, a lot of people stopped being able to read it. And then there's a period of time in the church where it became very corrupt, where it's like the priesthood held on to the sacred texts, and it's like, no, we're not going to retranslate it for you. Like I am the priestly class, right? The cardinals and bishops and the priests, right? And it's like, I'm going to stand between you and God, and
the vanguard.
Whatever God says, like, I will let you know, which is exactly what you're talking about. And then here comes along Martin Luther, right, with the idea of like, no, I'm going to retranslate the Bible, right, so that everybody can have access to God, like the way that Jesus described it, but the way that Jesus intended it is what I meant to say. But as you were talking about the vanguard earlier, it's exactly the same thing that's put into place here. Is you have like a priestly class of people that can redefine the critical theory whenever it meets their ends to do so, and then you have a congregation underneath of them that all they can do is just call and response whatever the slogans are. They don't understand them, they can't internalize them, but they understand the call to action when it goes out. Go out and hit the streets. There's got to be unrest in the streets as long as there's unrest in our lives. Like, they understand that. They understand fascist bad. They understand Nazi bad. And so as long as you can do that, and notice how they always dumb down the language when they hit their call to action, so that way all of their street troopers like go out and do the thing, right? And then as soon as they need to change it, then they just like dial it, and then boom, and now we're into the next phase of it.
Yeah,
it's very interesting. That's what I was thinking as you were describing it.
And just the inability to define anything creates a state of constant confusion, which makes everything easily fluid to where you can perfectly adjust it to exactly whatever the narrative is today. And that's why, for myself and many conservatives, we are just dying to just define something and move forward with it. This whole idea of everything being so evolutionary, it's always evolving, it's always changing. No, it's not. A woman is a woman. That is what it is. A man is a man. That's what it is. It's never changed. It's not going to change, no matter how badly you want it to change. And we can apply that to so many things that are constantly evolving and progressing in the leftist sphere, that it is incredibly dangerous, especially for our children.
Well, I was going to say to you, Chris, there's a old Marxist slogan, and it is disrupt, dismantle, destroy. And that's exactly what you were talking about there. To keep on with this critical lens, right? So people who believe in critical theory believe that something like racism, since we're talking about it, was a founding feature of society. And so therefore the society that was founded on it is now is a permanent fixture of it, and therefore that society cannot remedy it, so that society must be destroyed and replaced with something different. And that inherently is something that is Marxist, because if something is a feature, it must be destroyed, and therefore it is not revolutionary in nature until it is something that is creating oppression, right? And this is why Marcuse had issue with people who had money in capitalism. And he said the ghetto populations are the only people that we should talk to about this, because they're the only ones with revolutionary spirit. But kind of going in back into, like, Chris, you talking about dismantling of societies, right? There's so much stuff out there, especially over the last few years, that's propaganda about, like, what you're talking about, Brianna. Okay. There's all these notions about who is inherently bad, and that's constantly changing. And that gets into, you know, these ideas about collective groups and then collectivism. White men are inherently bad, right? That's a very popular one. Another group that's coming back around as being popular is the Jews, right? All of these things are it's cyclical, it's history, but the thing with it is, and the why of propaganda needing to collectivize, is that propaganda for one is no propaganda at all, because for propaganda to work, it must represent an entire group of people. This is an oversimplification, much like you were describing earlier, when this is what's going to solve the problem. The government's going to come in and replace opportunity with entitlement, right, or handout, and this is what's going to save all of this, right? So finding out what motivates them, what values they share, going after it, right? Disrupt, dismantle, destroy. And that's it. That society can't heal itself. It's one of the reasons why I have so many issues with people who black pill, which with whatever it is, you know, everything is unfixable in one way or another. I can't stand black pilling that hard. Like, I get, like, some things, it's like, man, this is never going to get solved. But like total nihilism, that's not healthy, right? I hate that. Chris and I talk about nihilism a lot. Yeah. Well, that's the root of a lot of this evil, right?
Antithetical to being Christian.
Yeah.
Nihilism is.
Well, sure. It's the root problem of a lot of these issues, because if you're saying essentially there's no solution, okay, what you're really admitting here is you are nihilistic about the outcome, and then when you become nihilistic about it in that way, anything is permissible to get out of it. And that's how people wander down the path of justifying owning the means of production for food and starving off kulak farmers, right? This is what Stalin did. It justifies violence. It justifies Venezuela, because exactly, right? It justifies dropping your kid off at school and then taking your wife to a protest and then winding up stalking ICE vehicles and blockading the road and losing your life, right? That's what ends up happening with people that allow themselves to become so nihilistic. They believe first off that it can't be solved. I think this situation is so bad, therefore anything I do is allowed, and then you go and do it.
You've been radicalized.
That's it. That's the way to do it. That's it. You have been radicalized completely. And what's funny is you've done it to yourself, essentially. It's kind of nuts.
And it's brainwashing, it's radicalization, and it always ends up connecting back to education. I remember when I'm technically Gen Z, even though I don't like to admit it. And
Well, I reject
technically
being
I
millennial,
am.
so.
I was gonna say, at this point, I'd rather be Gen Z almost. You know, like.
Yeah, and I feel like we
fault.
were all given a bad
Yeah,
deck of
right.
cards.
At least you're not. Yeah, no, we were. Fair enough, right?
We were both dealt a bad hand. But when it comes to that, when I was in school, when we were obviously being taught critical race theory, my teacher literally told all of the white kids in my class to apologize to me for what happened, like openly. I was the one of two black kids in the class. And yeah, Yeah,
So
please
awkward.
laugh at it because it's absolutely hilarious.
It's ridiculous.
It's absolutely hilarious. And but what it does to kids is it raises them to think I was the bad guy, and it raises black kids to believe I am entitled to this kind of treatment as if it's an accomplishment or something. And what true equality is, it never lives in that. It doesn't grow in that. And I find that even if I tell anybody like I am not oppressed and I am not a victim, it ends up being, well, let me tell you how much of a victim you are. I'm like, please tell me more about being
Right.
black. I'd love to know.
Yeah.
Please
I haven't
tell
been
me more.
doing it right
But,
my whole life. Please just let me know.
like, tell me.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting to me how clear the brainwashing is. Like it's like a switch that goes off to show that there's true brainwashing that's happening on the left. And even just the smallest amount of showing that you don't subscribe to it will genuinely enrage people and cause people to see you as a completely different person. This party of inclusivity instantly turns into, you are the worst thing in the planet. I could tell you all the names that I'm called on a daily basis if you want, but I'm sure you can use your imagination. But I'm called Uncle Tom on the regular. I'm called a coon on the regular,
sure.
because it's just, how
Easy.
dare you believe that you have access to anything? And the minute that you actually do believe that, they have to do that, because if you actually believe that you're free, and this goes no matter the direction, if you actually believe that you're free and you actually have access to anything that you want, and we live in a capitalist society where you're free to choose how your life goes, I don't have control over you anymore. I don't have a way of manipulating you anymore. I don't have a way of controlling your vote and the direction that you go in. And so now that there's so many people that are gradually going in the direction of conservatism, which is primarily people that push for capitalism, that is when they had the droves of illegal immigrants coming in, 20 million people that we can use as heads when it comes to our house heats, and people that we can use as heads to go ahead and flip their immigration status as soon as they get here. For a lot of them, Kamala swung her little magic wand and boom, you're legal for a lot of people. And it created a voting block for them, because they know how powerful the black vote is for them and how powerful the white liberal vote is for them. And if they don't have that, if people actually believe that they're free, God forbid, they need people here that are not free at all, because they can deport them if they want to, if they don't see the value in them. It's never actually about helping people. It's about using people. That's all it's ever about.
Well, you talked about it. What you mentioned earlier when we were sort of talking about the infiltration in the education. We were talking about creating an army without firing a shot. This piece you're talking about of illegal immigration and flooding the country with people. It's the second portion of like this plan, if you viewed it like this, right? You create an entire generation of Americans who think that they are oppressed. They have this illusion that the entire group agrees, even though they don't, which is why they're so shocked and resort to binaries and extreme insults and things like that immediately, because they cannot fathom that you don't think the way they do, right? It's like a shock to their system. But how do you get people to agree to completely fold underneath government tutelage? Well, you import peasants. That's literally what it is. That's what all of these people are. They are Somalians. On average, 70% of Somalian immigrants in the country, to use this number because it's popular right now, and I've spent some time looking into it. 70% of that population is on social welfare. Yep. These states that have right now are being investigated for fraud. The two of the bigger ones right now are Minnesota and Ohio. I know they're going to open a can of worms in California. We'll see how that goes. But Minnesota, did you know, is a state where when you show up to vote, that you can bring up to 8 people with you and vouch for them as citizens and allow them to vote. And there's supposed to be oversight once those people vote to make sure that who voted is a citizen. What's the oversight for that? Is that really happening? A serious question. I don't know. So, this idea of like replacement theory, right? It may not be real in the way that a lot of people think, but this introduction of an entire peasant class of people that are dependent from the second they get here, well, it sure is a lot easier to manipulate and control them because they're used to it anyway, and they have nothing when they get here, and that's automatically better than whatever the fuck is going on in Somalia, right? So that's it. That's easy. It's a ready-made class of people.
And they know it works because it's what they've done with any other lower class of people in this country for the longest time. It's how they've guaranteed 93% of the black female vote continuously since the dawn of time, it feels like. So they know that they can continue to do that. They know it's falling apart. They know people are picking up on the pandering and the lack of actual results, no matter the intentions that they put forward. And so I mean that's the solution, and that's why they have trained all of these people to protect them at such a length, like what we just saw in Minnesota, because now they have this army of people that are going to protect them no matter what, even if the logic is just absolutely it's not tangible, right? People came here illegally, therefore they must go. But now people are just absolutely losing their mind when basic law is being enforced.
It's against their best interest. Go ahead, Chris.
How illogical like their thought process is. I saw a video just before we sat down tonight that BLM is campaigning in downtown Minneapolis again over this situation. What the hell do they have to do with this situation that just happened?
Oh, they just need to get some more donations again.
Well, of course.
That's what it is.
I know that, but it's just it's so asinine.
People forgot they were investigated for fraud anyway.
Even on its face. You know what I mean? And then to what you guys are talking about, like importing these third world groups of people, this like automatic lower class, that soft racism is so on display because in one side they'll tell you like these people are inherently valuable and we need them and they just want the American dream, and then they'll turn around on the other side of their right out of the other side of their mouth and be like, well, who's going to pick the corn out of your fields if they don't show up here? Who's going to clean your toilets? Like they will say that to your face. Like Jasmine Crockett is on the microphone going like, they ain't going to make us pick the cotton. Like, okay, but you'll make the third world Venezuelans come in and you'll make them do it. Like, it's perfectly fine.
And there's a whole collection of black people that firmly believe, and it's not very publicized, but it's because I'm told it at least once a day, that they're going to start coming for me. They're going to start coming for black people. I'm next. I'm told I'm next all the time. Because now they're going after Somalis. So because Somalis are black, even though they're only black when it's convenient, because they always say that they're not black, but now they're black because they need to say that this is racist. And so now I'm being told I'm next, and I'm not gonna, the white conservatives aren't gonna help me in the situation, so I need to leave and I need to go to the left so that I can be protected over there, because they're just gonna come for me because I'm black.
That's that Marxism coming through. It's your identity. That's what matters, not the individual.
Yep, it's all identity politics.
Well, to use one of their arguments against them, right? Like, the idea is that we have to continually, sorry to step on you, Brandon, we have to continually give up our privacy. And the argument is, well, if you're not doing anything illegal, what's the big deal? Right? And so if they're saying, like, hey, I'm afraid to walk around the streets of Minneapolis, well, if you're legally an American, what's the big deal?
Yeah.
Just to turn that one around, just to use the mirror.
Yeah.
But Americans are getting deported, guys. Americans are getting deported.
Yeah.
That's the response.
Yeah. Well, they think everything like they think things that like what happened. I keep going back to this, but what happened in Minnesota yesterday is somehow the Boston massacre all over again, or something like that. When it's not even close. And Chris made a reel earlier. We haven't put it up yet, but he essentially was making the point that everybody can look at something, the exact same thing, and walk away with totally different interpretations. and this is something I experienced a lot as a cop as well. If something happens and you go to interview witnesses, you're going to get totally different stories. Somebody, 3 out of 4 people saw a red car hit, somebody, and then that one person says the car was purple or blue, right? Or that they were wearing, a certain set of clothing. They were black, they were Mexican, or whatever. You're going to get that because when something happens to people, their brain is processing stuff so fast, and it's really when you go total lizard brain. It's why the military focuses so much on training, because we like to say in the military that when something's happening like that, you fall to the level of your training. So this is a natural thing anyway, but it's gotten so worse because of the political ideological capture of people. They're not even trying to look at something objective anymore. They've been told that this is bad, or because it is now a certain group that's involved, there's not going to be anything that's going to change their mind about whether it's intrinsically good or intrinsically bad. And so we've arrived at this place where there's permanent impasse, and you can't communicate to anybody, because not only can you not get them to agree that a cop is not inherently bad, or black people are not inherently less intelligent, or whatever you want to say, right? You can't even ontologically agree on what you saw anymore in front of you, because your lizard brain has taken over, and now you believe something to be true. It's a constant impasse at all turns, and it goes to go back to what you were saying before about these immigrants, right? And all of these people that exist on social welfare and bringing them in to vote, and this peasant class, right? I remember Elon Musk was talking about, when he was auditing the government, whatever he was looking at, that at least 20% of the government budget is fraud, right? And that number comes out to like $1.5 trillion that every year is spent on total bullshit, and it's going somewhere to somebody's pockets, or to solve homelessness, even though it gets worse every year. But then you look at how much money Americans spend on taxes every year. Well, the fiscal year of 2024, Americans spent something like almost $3 trillion in taxes, right? So what you're effectively telling me then is that if we cut out fraud, that 60% of the taxes you pay, you don't need to pay anymore. What could you do with 60% more money, right? What could the national budget do with 60% more money going toward paying off the national debt, or fixing roads, or solving, school lunch problems, why kids have school lunch debt, and all these other things that, we have real problems here in the United States that deserve to be solved. And so for somebody, again, right, to go out and actively advocate and fight on the behalf of somebody who's quite literally robbing you and your children blind, right? Like there's almost no incentive in any way, shape, or form for me to want to agree with you either, because you have now become effectively this person that's, in my eyes, obstructing this whole country healing itself. Like you want, it's like you're choosing to allow the sickness to continue to exist, and that's how so many people view this. And it's easy to get caught in that trap and not reach out to people. But I think we have reached a point where there's just more impasse than is almost tolerable. Would you guys agree?
Oh, yeah. And absolutely. And I think to touch on that impasse, I think the reason there is such an impasse there, and what feels like an impossibility for us to actually unite on anything, is the fact that their ideology geniusly really has been partnered with virtue. Like there is a certain level of virtue and goodness connected to the ideology. If you want to be a good person, if you want to be a good white person, a good black person, a good whatever kind of person, you need to be thinking this way. So that's why people stay such a slave to it, even if they're more in the center, they have to have certain things that are left leaning. Even if they're Christians, they have to be all about pro-choice. Even if they're Christians, they have to think this way as well, because there is a certain amount of virtue that's connected to it. I'm a bad person if I'm pro-life. I'm a bad person if I think people need to be deported. And they're shown all these images of these deportations gone wrong, or aggressive situations, and they firmly have been taught to believe if I think any differently, my virtue signal is shot 100%.
Sure.
And so honestly, I think a genius thing that they did was simultaneously, while doing the brainwashing, is connect it to virtue and goodness. And if you want to be a good human being on this planet, you need to think that way. And then at the same time, make conservative ideas and anything that's right-wing the absolute enemy. You connect the words Nazi, Hitler, all of these different terms that trigger the worst of humanity and the worst of human assaults into that equation. And you've got the perfect recipe for people that will never leave, because they firmly believe if you're on that side, you're Hitler. I remember Jasmine Crockett, even herself, in that debate that I did, they actually cut this part out, but one person said that black people were actually inherently conservative, and the left was saying, no, we're not, absolutely not. And then I was like, Jasmine Crockett herself actually said that black people are inherently conservative, but we, and I quote, don't want to be over there with the KKK in them, and I quote. Like, they are firmly conditioned to believe this is the KKK. I am siding with white supremacists, and I am with the worst of the worst, and I'm contributing to my own demise. And so one genius thing they did was make it even not just an ideology, but an objective virtue as well.
I want to talk about the debate you did, but I think what you just said is perfect, because when you said that black people are inherently conservative, right? I was going to talk about what the point you were making about the evilification of the right. Well, what does the right do? The right is inherently conserving traditional values. I'll say this, and this is anecdotal evidence, it's a normative opinion, but almost every person I've ever known who's black and have been friends with and have been invited in their family has a heavy emphasis on family members and discipline in the home with kids and religion and all of these things. Like those things are what they are, traditionally conservative values. That's what those are. And so it's just funny to hear you say that, because it's true. But they would sit there and say to you, right, that that's not true, because those things are just normal in my life. Never mind the fact that the ideology you're supporting on the other side wants to eradicate that, right? And then that it mirrors ideas like community kitchens and community dining halls in communism, right? Like that's what's got to happen over here. You don't eat at home with family. Like that's a total destruction of a conservative idea of a nuclear family eating at home together. That is a conservative idea. The idea, conservative meaning we're conserving these traditions, right? If there's a gate in the middle of the field that seems useless, a liberal will say, well, let's just tear it down. It has no point. A conservative will say, well, why is it here? Let's figure that out before it's gone, right? That's the difference. But go ahead, Chris.
I just thought that she was making such a good point, as like at the theoretical level, they tied it to virtue, because everybody is afraid of being a bad person, right? Like we came through at least a decade in my lifetime where it's like a racist is the worst, most terrible thing that you could be called, and like people would get fired over it. I actually know a guy in the military that got UCMJ action against him because somebody accused him of making a racial joke, like in a public setting, and so they tie it to that, but then they also tie it to people's idea of wanting to be morally superior, because everybody wants to feel good about themselves, and so it's sort of a sense of pride. But drawing a line from the point that you were making about how these problems get so entrenched in the government to the point where it's like it cannot be solved. And I'm also going to pull Thomas Sowell back in here from the beginning of the conversation. And one of the most insipid ways that they do it is they tie it to the entitlement, right? Where it's like, hey, you're raised to believe, or these people are imported here and get baptized in the idea that you deserve this, like it is entitled to you, right? And so then to one of my favorite quotes by Thomas Sowell, he says, like, if you've spent your entire life believing that these things are entitled to you, right, even though it maybe was above zero, like zero is here, and this is like where we all start, but you're writing here because you have these entitlements, and then all of a sudden those entitlements do get taken away. well, now you feel like you've gone sub-zero, because it's like my whole life I've been conditioned to believe that this is mine, right? And so it's like that's how it's one of the chains that holds people there. I mean, go back to LBJ in the Great Society, right? Like, he is quoted as saying, like, I'm going to keep this group of people voting Democrat for 200 years, right? Like, that's a quote by him, and they knew exactly what they were doing when they designed it.
And the coincidence there is the fact that while Black families were so, I mean, our families were so close-knit and we held each other so accountable, while we still wish for that and we want that, the very people that took that away literally went to Black homes and knocked on their door and said, if you get rid of this man in your house, you get this money, is the Democrats. Which I find so ironic, how in the heart of our community is family and staying together. The way that it went from 25% of Black families not having the father in the home to what is now around 85%, give or take, is the very policies that they let infiltrate our community. And so the fact that we side so heavily, it baffles me.
And it's not just that either. I mean, if you go back and look in the history of Planned Parenthood with Margaret Sanger, who her whole shtick was eugenics, right? And so, like, the entire thing is she was trying to get the Black population to abort their babies away. I can't remember if it was on this podcast or if it was all the way back when I was doing my own thing for a little bit, but I actually talked about the percentage of where if the Black community were to stop aborting their babies, like this year, within 20 years,
we'd stop being a minority.
The Black community wouldn't be a minority in the United States. It just wouldn't.
That's a wild thing to think about.
You go in and look at the percentage of Planned Parenthoods that are in low-income neighborhoods in the inner cities adjacent to the Black community. It is very apparent of why it's there and what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
And then it's government
and for anyone
on top of that.
It is, and that's and they're government protected, which is why no pregnancy centers can be within a few miles of a Planned Parenthood, and yet the Planned Parenthoods are so conveniently located within walking distance from the poorest parts of the Black community. And I'll add into that for anyone that's watching, please dig into Margaret Sanger. It's absolutely amazing, the letters that she wrote to Black churches and the letters she wrote to the people that are within her circle. I mean, it was literally blanket clear. Why we know she was a eugenicist is because she quite literally said, we need to find a way to keep them from knowing that we are keeping down their population and we must eradicate them. It's quite literally eugenics, and it has done exactly that. It has maintained our population being anywhere from 8 to 11% for ever since around 1973. And since 1973, despite us being such a minority, every single year, there are about 350,000 Black abortions. And since 1973, there have been 18 million Black abortions, despite us being this small population. Now, in total, there's about 63 million that have happened since 1973. But the fact that we take up 18 million, being such a small population, it just goes to show it. And the first Planned Parenthoods were placed in Black communities, and the first time that there was any speeches about Planned Parenthood, it wasn't at a convention center, it was in Black churches that she got Black pastors to let her give speeches about Planned Parenthood in Black churches, because that's where we congregated. That was the heart of our community, was the Black church. It just goes to show, and Hillary Clinton always references Margaret Sanger as one of her favorite women in history.
Well, what happened with like Fannie Willis, right? The second she started getting investigated, she goes to the biggest Black church in Atlanta and she starts talking about how she's being targeted. That's like the place to go, right? When you're a Black politician, what does Jasmine Crockett do? She went to that same church, or really big Black church, right, where people are congregating. It's preying on this trope that you're talking about here. I actually was wondering, Could you just go into, if you know about some of these letters she wrote, and just describe some of the language in them so people can hear, and go into that a little bit, just real quick, to describe what it is, like truly like her message to the Black community was like.
Well, there were a number of letters that ended up coming out, but they all ended up carrying something very similar to what I said earlier. How her plan was to invade Black churches, so she would write multiple letters to different pastors, just talking about how she wants to speak to the Black community about what will make it so that they don't need to have these financial issues, and it was essentially created as a way to make it so that we don't need to worry about all the babies that we're having, that we don't need to have the financial struggle that comes with these babies. That was the beginning of the language of child equals ailment, child equals struggle, child equals this is going to be the thing that ends my life. And so she had a lot of that language in there, and then also she spoke a lot. It really is. It really is. And to me, it's just prophetic. One of the ways it 100% is. I mean, if you look at any of the language that goes into the abortion industry in general, I guess I can get a little conspiracy theory-ish here.
Yeah, go for it. This is a podcast.
I firmly believe that abortion is child sacrifice. I don't think it's anything less than that. If you look at what the pagans and the Mayans did, for example, the Mayans, they had like stone hands that were shaped like this, and they put a fire underneath it, and that is where you would sacrifice your baby to have a better life. And what does everyone always say? I needed to do this to what? Have a better life. I couldn't have a baby because I could not have this. I could not get my career. It's always sacrificing your child to have a better life. And so everything that we're seeing when it comes to abortion, and this is one of the topics I'm most passionate about because I have a child and it just makes me sad, but when it comes to abortion, this is quite literally just, Satan is loving this, being able to destroy what the author of life creates. That, children, evil. Life, God creates that. If he's able to eradicate that, it's bliss for him. He's enjoying this a lot.
To keep on that idea, right? To say that a baby in the womb is not a person is to say that Christ was not the Savior in the womb. Right? Yeah. That's exactly what you're saying. I agree with you, and I know Chris does too, that it's demonic. I think that it's evil. It's the darkest evil in the world, right? There's nothing more innocent on earth than a baby. It's just
how do you get a postmodern society that's disconnected from God, right? You talked about the Mayans and went back there. It's like, well, they didn't understand science to the level that we did, so there's a lot more of the occult. There's a lot more of like, oh, he's sick, oh, he must have a demon. It's like they didn't understand this stuff, right? So it's easy to be like, if you throw your baby into the fire that's going to rain this year, you'll be prosperous. How do you get a postmodern society that doesn't believe in religion anymore to sacrifice a child? Materialism, right? And it's the same thing. And then, it's not a person anymore. Right, so you're not sacrificing it. It's just a clump of cells. And I think that you made such a good point. And I've actually drawn that through line several times before, so I was really excited to hear you talk about it. One more thing, and I'll hand it back over to you, Brandon. That I think is also very crucial, is that if you can convince a woman to do the most inhuman thing for a woman to do in killing her child, then you've also destroyed a piece of that lady's soul, because that is so inhuman for a woman to sacrifice a child. Now, maybe she's doing it ignorantly because she's completely, bought the line, hook, line, and sinker that it's not a real person yet, so on and so forth. But I've talked to so many women throughout my life that just carried an inherent sense of guilt afterwards. Even though they'll say that they believe the rhetoric, so, like somewhere inside of them,
it's the right choice for me at the time.
They still carry that guilt with them, because it's like they knew that they did something wrong. And if you can do that, then you can further drive. Well, first of all, it becomes like the sunk cost fallacy naturally, right? Like at that point, you start clinging to whatever your ideology is, because in order to now admit that what I did was wrong, or that any part of this ideology is wrong, then that would be to admit that I murdered a child back over here, and I can't do that. So you become in for a penny, in for a pound, and then that person becomes most of the time just ideologically captured wholly. It becomes very hard to reach them. So
well, I want to keep on the your idea, the conspiracy thing, real fast here, since this is a podcast, right? But if you look at what people say that the Nephilim taught human beings, right? Some of those things they taught them about were astrology and the stars, right? And what were cultures like the Mayans really, really good at? Well, tracking the stars, right? And so if you look at what the Nephilim were, they came down and had relations with the daughters of men, and then had a new race of people, or half people, right? Half whatever. What an easy lie to teach them all these amazing things about the sky and how it works and how you can track it, and it literally is it's a science, right? And then to pervert that even further by knowing, I'm going to tell you to sacrifice a baby, or today we're going to kill 50 virgins, or whatever. And that is going to mean that this massive celestial body in the sky is going to view you with more favor, and tomorrow it will rain, right? What a cruel joke to play on a group of people that you want to see destroyed, by telling them to kill their offspring and then tie it to something. I mean, that's like, if that's real, right? That's like the earliest form of sophistry, right? It's just to convince them it's all, there's a note of truth in here, but there is also a whole lump of bullshit. And but anyway, I mean, who knows? Maybe that's where that all began. It could be, if you believe that is true, and that's But I actually really want to hear. I was going to say one thing about your notion about inherent good and the act of it, in your intrinsic value. But Marx viewed the revolution as what he called a purifying event. Well, purity is goodness, right? And so to call the ending of all of these oppressive this impressive infrastructure is a purifying event, well, then that is the most good that you can do, right? Is to purify a society of all of its ills, and being that you've now tied your identity to that, well, that is goodness, right? Like you can't be good unless you believe these things, and then by doing that you're purifying all of this other stuff. And to tie it to what you said, Chris, at the top of the show, it's a religiosity. There's an orthodoxy involved in this, right? Marxists or political theorists would call that an orthopraxy. That's exactly what that's called. So I really want to hear about your debate and what that was like. I've seen snippets of it, not the whole thing, but to go from quitting your job and doing this now to winding up where, they're on that debate, right? And in front of so many eyeballs, which is amazing. What was that like? But I want to know too, right? Like the conversations you had, what you took away from it by talking to other people and other Americans, right? Who is experiencing the same things you are, but believing something totally different, right?
Yeah, I valued it greatly, simply because, when we're in our bubbles, right, I feel like no matter what, you're going to fall victim to being in an echo chamber. You're going to be in your bubble of people that think like you. It's really hard to have an opportunity to sit across from a bunch of liberals and actually have a controlled and moderated dialogue. So I saw it as a great opportunity. And one thing, the experience in total, the Dr. Dash show is amazing. They have quite the operation. It was great. And they had some really, really great questions. But one thing that I noticed, and a lot of comments noticed, is that a lot of them said like hardcore conservatives versus conservatives, because a lot of them had a lot of conservative ideas. They just did not want to say they're a conservative. And there were some things that were inherently different between us, right? Just the whole idea of DEI and affirmative action, for sure, was a big point of contention for us. And the topic of reparations was a huge point of contention as well. Yeah, which that was very, very interesting. And all in all, I learned for sure that we have a lot of the same goals. This was very Black community focused because it was Black liberals versus Black conservatives. So we have a lot of the same goals. We want the Black community to progress and get better. That's something we all want, as we were all part of the Black community. But the huge difference between us was how we get there and what we need in order to get there. We inherently believe we need less government intervention, and we need to have more accountability held on our side, and we need to hold our community accountable for what happens and what we do. Whereas for them, there were a lot of excuses for the things that we do and the statistics that we hold, and it was a lot of pointing the finger at who is at fault for those things and finding it to be justified. So for example, when it came to the topic of Black crime, one I hate to laugh. I really hate to laugh. I love all these people. I promise.
Laugh away, dude.
But one thing that came up was that the reason for Black crime is trauma. We love the word trauma, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah. So trauma.
Kind of trauma.
Trauma is why there is such an issue. And one thing I brought up, which was also cut out, was the fact things happen. It was cut out also because so many people were talking over me. So I think mic wise, it was probably hard to actually make out what I was saying.
Kind of a bad clip.
Probably was a bad clip. But one thing I mentioned was the fact that our fatherlessness is a direct correlation, fatherlessness that's brought forward thanks to so many of our democratic policies and programs that are instilled in all these socialist policies, is directly correlated to gang activity and gang violence. Because one through line that you'll always hear, any gang member that you talk to, any interview that I see, is that I didn't have a father and I found my father through this. This is how I found my dad. This is how I found the strong men in my community. The men that had money, the men that had success, the men that had respect were these men. And, they 100% objected to that. It was very much leaning more toward our trauma, and our generational trauma is the reason behind why these things happen. And I still have yet to figure out how there's like a real connection there. But it was a lot of excuses, trauma. These people did this to us. This happened in the past, for example, redlining and things like that. And one thing that was important for me to say was, yes, these things did happen. I don't live in an alternate reality where these things didn't happen and we weren't actually an oppressed people that were experiencing horrible things that should not have happened. But the connection as to how that affects us now still has yet to be known on my part. But they were great people, good intentions. I feel like good intentions is the way a lot of these policies end up being put into place. But one thing that Thomas Sowell talks about a lot is they judge their policies based off of intentions and not their results. And that's one question that I did ask them is, do you judge your policies based off of intentions or results? And they were a little shook up about that. It was a little shake-up question because I think so often, like we're seeing in New York with Mamdani right now, all of it is intention, right? My intention is to bring down the rent. My intention is to have free bus fares. My intention is this, intention is that, right? But the actual result is most likely going to be pretty catastrophic or not ever going to happen, because that happens pretty often, especially for the Black community, if we're referencing this debate. So it was a good experience for me to see what's kind of going on over there in that stratosphere. But it didn't leave me with much more of an answer as to why they think the way they do, but more of the way they think, which is we are attacked and oppressed and we have all of the excuses. And we aren't the solution. The solution is what we can get from other people, which I found to be really disappointing. And one thing that I made clear was that I believe in the Black community enough for us to get ourselves out of where we are. And as a culture, we are able to make a huge shift. But at the end of the day, giving a $50,000 check to a bunch of people that have some of the worst spending habits in this country is not the is not the goal. It's not the solution.
The trauma answer is, again, back to the whole Marxist oppressor-oppressed thing, right? That's somebody else's fault that I've been oppressed by them and it's caused trauma and I behave this way. It's you know, it's like the people saying, oh, you killed Charlie Kirk, so I found Nick Fuentes, you pushed me over here, right? Like, as if you have no personal agency whatsoever. It's a fucking cop-out answer. Every single one of those things are cop-out answers. But it made me think of a question I wanted to ask you, because to be quite honest, man, like a lot of the most ideologically captured people that I encounter and see, at least on social media, so take my perspective with a grain of salt, right? Everybody's perspective with a grain of salt, just seems to be mostly like a lot of white women, right? And it just kind of where I see it. And just I think by virtue of the population in this country, right? Like it's mostly white people in general. It's not in total, right? I'm not saying all white people in any way, shape, or form, but do you think it would be easier to find a bridge between Black conservatives and Black liberals, right, as a way and reconcile and come together as a recognize you're all Americans before you're anything else, sort of, and the ideals that shared values that Americans are supposed to share, and sort of heal that divide? Because I see it a lot less, right, with other people, I guess. Do you think that bridge is easier built?
I don't think so. And I'll tell you why. Back to colonization, a lot of people firmly believe that we need to think collectively in order to literally survive as a population. For example, I was talking to my aunt, who just so happens to be a DEI lawyer in New York, and you can connect the dots there, right? And so I was talking to her about interracial relationships. And for example, there are people that genuinely believe that we need to preserve the Black race. And so just the idea of an interracial relationship is a no-go. And that's a lot of people. I have a hard time thinking that there could be a true bridge there. And if I were to get a little dark in my response, it would be that there is a certain generation that needs to die off before that happens, because there is a generation of Black people that have actually lived through these things, not just living through it vicariously like a lot of people my age are. They think, oh, they did this to us, when you actually never lived it. There's people that have actually lived it, like the crack era and before, I would say. And so they help instill this ideology that we need to think this way in order to survive as a people and in order for our culture to survive. So I think it would take a few decades for us to get to that point, but I do think that's possible. And I also do think it is possible for other groups as well, but I think that is one of those things that will take a lot of time as well, because there is unfortunately generations that do need to die off in order for us to get to that point, because they help instill it, and they've taught their kids it, and they've taught their grandkids it. And so it's hard for me to think about a true bridge being built unless time did its process in my idea. Yeah.
I could see that, because
it's so deeply ingrained.
That's what I was
it really
say.
is.
This idea even isn't it's not even always a negative thing, right? Like, if you go back through history and look at oral tradition, right? Generations are who carry your story, and there's passed down, right? Native American cultures have a mega focus on oral tradition, but they're not the only ones. If you go look look back at even the Greek philosophers we all know, right? Some of them were inherently against writing, and they preferred oral tradition because they felt like it was an excuse to stop remembering, right? So it's not necessarily a bad thing that traditions carry or generations carry things over, but they do. And so I say that to say that it's not so dark to say that has to happen, right? Because it's, I think, a natural process, right? As generations go away, this is just how generations morph over time. And the good and bad tend to disappear, right? Which is why there's like this romanticization of, the frontier era now, right? With a lot of the really crunchy people and going off grid and having a farm and all these things, it's like, there is a romanticization of those things, but there's also the bad that carries over. And so just like anything else, there's that duality that you have to exist with. And maybe that dichotomy does get solved with just the natural process of life and people going away. But, I would say this then too, right? Like, in a revolution, right? Or you look at Iran, right, and you ask this question, or Venezuela, like, what's going on? Was the status quo that existed before the revolution better than whatever's going to happen after it, right? Is what the status quo is now in the Black community with the generation of people who lived through that, so passed on their lived experience, going to be better than people who, like you said, vicariously lived it out? And because they didn't live it, right, maybe they behave and cosplay as it, and they're more aggressive in those beliefs, right? So do you think it will get better? Or do you think that maybe once this generation of people is the grandparents, right, that it could be a little worse? Like it's the dark before the dawn sort of thing, so to speak. What do you think?
I think two things can be true at once. I do. I do think that there is somewhat of a Black conservative revolution that's happening right now. You may have even noticed, just scrolling through your timeline, there's a lot of Black conservatives that are coming to the forefront and challenging old ideas. I will say that as a Black conservative, I can say that there's a disconnect in the idea of moving forward. Like if I move forward from our past, they automatically think I'm not acknowledging it, if that makes sense. Like if I say we need to move forward from this time, they think you are ignoring it and you are not acknowledging it. But my version of acknowledging that time, and that what I try to get across, is that I am acknowledging and respecting my ancestors enough not to use what is their true trauma as kind of a trophy that I can use in order to gain X, Y, and Z. I'm not going to take what they went through, we were just talking about Emmett Till in the chat a while ago. Just these real things that happened. I'm not going to take that and use it as somewhat of a social currency to go ahead and gain all of these other things. They made it possible so that I can read my books, so that I can do all these different things. In my head, it's how dare I take what they went through and not take full advantage of what I have as a result of their sacrifices. I'm not going to try to sit here and say we're still enslaved is an insult to me.
I would agree with that.
We're oppressed is an insult to me. Because how can I sit here and say I'm oppressed when just for existing there was a time where pressure washers were used on us and chunks of our flesh were found on the street? That does not compute in my brain. But for me to say I'm not oppressed is an insult to people that think the only way we can acknowledge it is to mentally still live in it. And that's a disconnect that exists in the Black community that we need to continually work out of.
You know what that reminds me of is, and to go back to trauma, okay? When I was really going through therapy for post-traumatic stress, one of the things that we talked about was survivor's guilt. And the thing that we mentioned with survivor's guilt is that people have a hard time letting go of it because they feel like if they let go of it, then they're letting go of that person, right? That they maybe feel survival's guilt over, or a group of people or whatever. And the person experiencing that that guilt is carrying the memory with them, right? And if they let it go, then somehow that memory goes away too, and you're doing them a disservice, right? So that language you were talking about with the trauma of the past and not carrying it forward means you're doing them a disservice, and behaving that way, you know, is sort of the same idea that a therapist would tell you, like, it's unhealthy to behave that way. You are keeping yourself in the past. That person is not erased because you're forgiving yourself and moving on. They are still there. You know, you're honoring their life by having the life that you're supposed to, right? And so that just listening to you talk about that is exactly where my brain went, because I think that those ideas are completely parallel and congruent with each other. You know, survival guilt, it's what it is. It keeps you in the past, and it's okay to let that person go and be who you are. It doesn't mean that they're gone. Just the same with this, you know, it's okay to acknowledge that happened and let it go. It doesn't mean it didn't happen. It just means you learned from it and you're just carrying on with your life. And you know, it's like history in general, right? You keep that lesson inside and you're supposed to learn from it, right? It doesn't always work out that way, but that's exactly where my brain went when you were talking about that, is the conversation you would have about survivor's guilt. Yeah, because that's kind of what it is, you know, in a way, an odd way.
It kind of makes me think, as a father, like I'm sacrificing like really hard for my children. The same as like every parent, right? And if I go through this and I work hard and I turn something over to them, and then I find out, you know, from heaven that my kids just squander it and they just stay in the same place and they don't move forward, right? It's like, man, all this stuff that I sacrificed for you and you didn't do anything with it. Like that, like that's how I would feel. I would be disappointed, and I would have,
or
to
even do even worse,
right? And I would have to feel that my grandparents would feel the same way, and so that's kind of what I was thinking about, Brianna, as you were describing that, because it's like, well, wouldn't you think that by staying in the same place, like, you're not even acknowledging the sacrifices that your ancestors made and all the things that they went through pre-civil rights and all the way back into slavery? Like, you're staying right there. They went through all of that so that you could move forward. They fought hard so that you could have that better life, right? And so the saying that, like, we stand on the shoulders of giants, but if you crawl back down and put your feet back on the ground, what have you done with everything that they gave you? Now that makes sense to me, but I also understand where you're coming from when you say, like, and what you were saying too, Brandon, about the survivor's guilt. Like, I understand that very much as well, and it becomes hard to let go of the past, because it's like, I don't want to disrespect them, but then again, you would have to think, like, what would they want me to do with this gift that was given to me?
Well, my therapist would tell me it's not your job to hold on. No, sorry, this is the last thing I'll say about it, but she would tell me that it's not your job to hold on to that for them. It's not your job. As it does, it feels like a duty. And that's sort of how these people behave, is like, this is their duty to cosplay and grift off of the actual things that they went through, you know, and vicariously live through it again. You know, that's what it is. It's not your duty to hold on to it.
Yep. And when it comes down to it, for me, when I think about how life was before the Civil Rights Act, and this is one thing that people really misunderstood about Charlie when he said that Black life was better before the Civil Rights Act. I mean, obviously there was a reason for the Civil Rights Act, right? We can all collectively agree on that. But when we look at the statistics, as far as how tight we were as a Black community, how we were thriving as far as our economy was concerned, what we were contributing as far as being productive and contributing members of society, our levels of happiness, and the way we conducted ourselves even as a culture. I think one thing we forget is that music is always a mirror into our culture, especially in the Black community. And there was once a time where we had our families and we loved our women, and our music was all about our families and loving women.
Right.
And over time, it just,
I think that was
our
a
music
tool
ended
also.
up changing. 100%. It was a tool. It was a tool, especially in the recording industry, in order to shift the Black culture for sure. And you know, one thing that happened in that debate that was really an eye-opener for me was when we were talking about DEI and affirmative action. She was like, do you understand why we came up with that? Why we needed that? And it's like, yeah, I do. There was absolutely a time where Black people were absolutely qualified for jobs and they weren't given them, and they were given to less qualified white people because that's the culture that we had. 100%. And it was absolutely terrible. 100%. But it's 2025. And I just don't think we live in this hyper racist society anymore. Well, I know we don't, because when I'm overqualified for a job, like the job I just left, when I'm qualified for a job, I've gotten it. And then they're like, well, you look like this or you act like this. And I'm like, well, yeah, you get a job because of how you present yourself and how you articulate yourself and how you fit into a culture. That's how you get a job.
Taking personal
you
accountability.
don't walk into a job and not be dressed well for your interview, and you don't know how to articulate your ideas, and walk out and say, I didn't get that job because of racism. Maybe you just didn't do a good job there, right? And then what you're meant to do, what you should do, what everyone should do, is overqualify themselves in every other aspect. Everyone should do that, because then what we've done with the term racism is we've overused it to the point where we've diminished the impact of the term. Because if it actually is racism, if you have taken away all other objective, and there is no reason in the world why you wouldn't get that job, if you actually see racism happening, there would be impact in that. But there's no impact in that anymore, because we've said racism after you went to the job with a wrinkly white t-shirt on. Or we're calling racism to someone saying we have an issue with crime in Black neighborhoods. We call them racist. So we've diminished the impact of what used to be a term that brought up vitriol, because it is a terrible thing to be. But for example, someone says that Nick Fuentes is racist and he takes it as a compliment. You know, but he says things that are actually racist, but he just gets away with it because who cares with being called racist anymore? You probably just said something that's true. And that's what's frustrating about it to me, is that if it's true,
they're not going to acknowledge the fact that this is the pendulum swinging back for how far they pushed it one direction. I mean, it quite literally is, not to be too nursery rhyme about it, but it is the little boy that cried wolf. And the groups that have propagated this are getting the natural backlash of their actions, right? But the mentality now is so ingrained that, and the victim culture now is so ingrained that it seems to me, looking at it from my vantage point, is that they only know of one way to deal with it. And so it's the same thing that they've always done, but the problem is, it's like what you've always done is what's gotten you here. So I'm actually, something that my dad said to me a couple years ago, and it stuck with me very profoundly, is he said, I'm not as concerned about the push to the left. And this was back, I think it was either right after the midterms during Biden's administration. It was like just somewhere in there where all of this like second Trump wave was starting to build up again. And he goes, I'm not as concerned with the massive push to the left, because, you know, if you look at the way our culture's been since the 60s, it's always been subtly pushing to the left. He's like, I'm actually more concerned with the violent swing back to the right when that happens. And I was like, that's a really good point. And I think, you know, my dad being somewhat the prophet that he is in his own time, here we are, and you see the Nick Fuenteses and, just go on down that direction, and here we are. It's violently swinging back to the right, and I'm like, man, he was right. He was correct.
Yeah.
So many people don't realize that it's just like people assume that, well, I just am going to get this revenge in real quick and there's not going to be a response, right? Like people are going to naturally respond to that. And it's the danger of setting precedents that are risky. If you do this, well, yeah, that feels good in the moment. And, maybe it is justice, or maybe it's a version of justice, right? That's motivated by something that's, maybe savory or not. There's going to be a reaction to that eventually, right? Nothing remains in permanence ever. You will eventually lose power. This person will eventually die. The situation will change. The terms will be dictated again, right? Society, civilization has to find a way to coexist in a manner in which you're not constantly looking to one up and take revenge on one another. And that's what shared values are supposed to be. That's why and I said earlier before, right? Like this group of people that believe this, I say they're dangerous, and not because that, necessarily I think they're going to physically hurt people, but because what they believe is so insidious that it literally exists to dissolve society completely and totally. And they believe that their actions to dissolve society and in these structures that are oppressive is a purifying event. There is no greater good that you can do, right? You are reborn in it by your action. And they believe that completely and totally, which is why I don't really know how you solve this problem we're facing here in the United States right now. We're not going to legislate our way out of it in any way, shape, or form. Mm-hmm. The topic of going after, Americans who think one way and deporting them, right? Like, that's not going to happen. And if it does, like, you're completely subverting a lot of things, right? Like now, you can have this conversation about the Insurrection Act, right? Well, we can have a conversation about the necessary steps that are afforded inside the Constitution to take action, or, amending the Constitution to take action, or all of the other things. And this is a conversation that Chris and I have had, right? I don't know how to remedy the absolute impasse so many people now are at. It's not two fringes anymore. And it's so bad that the fringes have so much population that they are conflating with one another. And I see so many people that are now conservative or now liberal or whatever it is, and I don't believe them. And I think that they are ideologically homeless, because I know you don't believe these things. You're just disaffected with whatever the fuck was going on over there in your life before. That's not principled thought. You will 100% return to whatever it is, or move somewhere else like a locust, the second it doesn't vibe with whatever you think should be going on. And those are the people that you should be the most concerned about, because those are the people that are arriving at that destination of nihilism and black pilling and narcissism and thinking, oh, well, whatever, I'll do that. It's totally permissible because none of this shit matters anyway. The whole system's broken, so therefore nothing and everything matter all at the same time, right? That's that dangerous road, like I said at the top of the show, about now you've justified whatever action it is. And so this population of people that exist here, I don't know how to reach out to them other than just constantly talking about the right thing, or what I think is the right thing, and looking back at history and patterns and behavior and all of these things, and trying to A, discuss them, and B, emulate them, and then raise children to emulate those behaviors. Like that seems to be the only real natural process, is to outpopulate a group of people like that. But it does mean... This is the harsh reality of almost everything. There is no cutting corners. You must go through the hard thing now. And when you come out the other end, you're going to be that lump of coal that gets polished into a diamond. Society is going to survive one way or another. What comes out the other end is hopefully better than what was going on in the middle of the hard period. But I think it just says to me and acknowledges that dichotomy of life, that maybe we don't reach those people and there is a hard period, and that's just what we're going to have to do and raise kids anyway. Chris and I have said before on other podcasts, yeah, the Great Depression was a thing. People were starving, right? They still had fucking kids. They still did all of those things. I think that's just I think that's life's natural way. What do you think?
I do think that we've reached a point of even division within the division that we had already created. Like, there's the left and the right, and it was a left and a right back and forth for a long time, and now it's the right and the right and the left that are having a lot of discourse. It's true, we've broken into four, because that's why I have in my bio that I'm politically homeless. It's not that I don't know where I stand. It's just, I know I'm not that too. I know I'm not there. I'm not that far over there to where the moment that there's a trend of what I should think, within 2 hours, I have posted something saying the exact same thing. At this point, this whole idea of, oh, you've been paid $7K, or they're scripting everybody, they don't even need to do that, honestly, because there is a script that it's like there's a thought that goes out and everyone just starts following it. And the minute that you have a thought that is different than that, the vultures from your own side will come for you as well. Like, if I have a criticism of Trump, if I have a criticism of the right in any way, anything, if it's something I just don't agree with, it is insane how your own quote unquote side will come after you as well. It's insane. I think a lot of this has to do with social media. I think we need to get a hold on things, because social media, at this point, that is the perfect tool to be able to keep people divided. I honestly don't know what the solution is when it comes to social media, because it's also being a part of these little clubs and cliques has also been the main source of income for so many people. So like, I guarantee you, if I also threw on a MAGA hat, I'd definitely be making 2 times more than I am now. If I also threw on a MAGA hat, and I also look,
right, somebody
just
would write you immediately.
Do it, just do it.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It's insane. And so, not to say that people that do sport a MAGA hat are bad people. Some of them are my friends. No, I gotta throw that in there. Okay. Not that they're bad people, but I do think that it's exactly because I'll be the first to say that the tokenism exists on both sides, in different fonts, right? It exists on both sides. But I think that's always going to be something that exists. It just is. But I, as far as a solution, I have a hard time thinking of one, because we are so deep in the matrix. We are so deep in it. I mean, people don't watch the news anymore because it's so deep in the matrix, but then people only get their information from 3-minute videos on the internet, and they don't actually research or develop their opinions on anything. We have people doing the craziest things in the first 3 seconds of a video to get the hook, because that's the attention span people have. People do not read books, not because they don't have the knowledge, they just don't have the attention span anymore.
We are the TLDR generation.
It's insane. And so I have a hard time thinking of a solution, because we are so incredibly deep in the matrix. I feel like at this point we would have to make not thinking that way a literal trend. Like, we would have to make it a trend trendy, to not be a part of the trend, which is sad, but it's true. I think we would have to make it a trend.
Countercultures.
We would have to make a club within a club to get out of the club, which is very weird.
You're still
I think most people are going to find this pretty trivial, but you said something earlier, and I thought it was actually very profound when you said that music is a window into the culture to see like what's going on.
Absolutely.
I think that if we started making beautiful things again, whether it's art, film, architecture, music, if we started building beautiful things again, I had written down here, and we rolled past it. It was something that we were talking about in the beginning. I like Hollywood has become one of those social barometers where it's like everybody kind of recognizes the ingrained Marxism in Hollywood, but I don't think that they're diagnosing it correctly. Like, they recognize the symptoms, right? They're able to say, oh my God, like Hollywood hasn't created anything that's not a prequel, sequel, remake, like overhaul, multiverse. Like, they can't make anything new, which is one of the things about Marxism. Like Brandon, you said, it only destroys. Like, it can't create something beautiful.
That's
and
intent is to destroy.
because that's, and I think because that's like one of the core tenets of Marxism, if we were able to start making beautiful art again, if we were able to start making good films again, you know, that's one of those ways to like permeate the culture, even to people that would never listen to us or never listen to you because of all of those things that you just mentioned, you know, TLDR, you know, it's like, not in my club, like keep scrolling. They'll sit down and watch a movie. They'll listen to music as they're going about their day. They're going to look up at a beautiful statue and, wow, that's very cool. You know what I mean? Art is more important than most people realize, is all I'm getting at.
Think of the periods of time where we tend to think that great thought and art and all of these things, right, came from, you know, the Renaissance. Well, that's coupled with not just art but science, right? Like, you've got Caravaggio and Botticelli and all these amazing things that you can go to the Uffizi and look at, this beautiful art, but then at the same time you have all of this science resurging there in Europe, right? And those things go hand in hand. You know, you have guilds who will spend generations building amazing things, right? We don't have the mindset to tackle big projects anymore the way we even did in the 1940s. You've got William Knudsen, who is able to go around the country and take all of the automobile manufacturing companies and the farm and agricultural equipment manufacturing companies and factories and say, we're going to build the great American war machine because we have a mental tolerance for that, and we did it. The Enlightenment period, other periods of great thought. Think of the music and the art that came out of those periods. Like, those things go hand in hand. I think that they're not, meant to be separated. Like, look at, what is communist Russia and the Eastern Bloc of Europe very famous for? Brutalism. There's nothing. It's boring, blank, dull, disgusting, dreary things, and what happens around it. You go walk around a Florence and you look at the Duomo, or you go walk around Rome or any of these places. Like, it's inspirational just to be in the presence of these amazing things. So you're right, Chris. I don't think it's trivial at all. I think they go quite hand in hand. And to your point earlier too about being like the tokenization of Black people or in movements as props, and then when you are that person that is not the norm in the group, right? Like, the intolerance of you as an individual is remedied by this illusion of a group identity. Like, that will leave you behind immediately the second you don't believe in it in any way, shape, or form. Like, this conversation has been overtly and covertly about Marxism because we're talking about not just it and calling it out for what it is on its nose, but talking about its systems and its thought processes, the lens, literally the critical lens through which they view life. And anytime I've sitting here listening to you talk and describe things, right, like trauma with the reason why there's so many problems in the Black community or crime or whatever, immediate thought, oppressor oppressed, all of these things, right? The tearing down of traditions, getting rid of the father figure in life. Well, there's that study that they did on kids who come from a single parent household, and they say that kids that come from a single parent household, that single parent is a father versus a single parent that's a mother. Well, the kids that come out of the single father household tend to show that behaviorally as an adult they behave more like kids who had a dual parent household. Well, there's something to be said for fathers and the rigidity of a father and the discipline that comes from a father. Like, that's on purpose, right? You can't, and to your point too at the top of the show about what is a woman, right? You have a purpose as a woman to do certain things, your maternal instinct, right? You, Chris, I think you are the one who said that by convincing a woman to have an abortion, you're convincing her to give away a piece of her soul. It's like, that's the most anti-maternal thing that you could do. right? Because your entire purpose is maternity. Like, I'm sorry, like, you're designed this way. You have the emotional tolerance and capability for that. Like, that's just it, right? Like, it goes beyond biology as well. Like, this is just the way things are. It's not to say that you're stuck doing things that are only womanly things or just manly things, right? Like, there are men who are heterosexual who like art and ballet, right? There are women who like to go shooting and they like building shit, right? Like, I'm married to a woman who likes to go and, you know, likes carpentry. Like, that's just something she likes, but that's like an inherently thought of as a man thing, you know. But you cannot get away from these things. No matter how far away you try to run from them, you will arrive back at those spots eventually, because it's your nature, you know. And that's why things don't work, because you are quite literally defying nature. I'm going to mute myself real fast because of the sirens. But,
and even when it comes down to the whole trans ideology, I mean, even just the
Let's
mere
crack the top on that one.
I love this topic. I really do.
have you been confronted by any trans
As a
people?
cis woman, huh?
But as if you've been confronted by any trans people on your oh no, you have the queer eye guy, didn't he? The queer eye guy that's right. Okay. Queer eye for the straight guy, whatever the hell it is. Okay, I'll let you tell.
Apparently he's not trans. He just wears dresses and makeup and has long hair, but he's not trans.
Okay. So he's aware he's a dude. He just likes to cross-dress.
But he identifies as fluid.
Seminal fluid. We'll edit that out. No,
that was great. I love that. But yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to take in. Wears crop tops. You know, it's a lot to digest there. But all I said was that I do not desire to be called a cis woman. I don't see the point in adding an adjective to the thing itself. If you need to describe the type of woman for the sake of conversation, if you need to describe the type of woman that you are, the actual thing does not need a prefix. I do not need a prefix. If you need your pronouns and your prefixes and your they, them, I am, thesers, all that, please, you know, go do that. That's all you, but you do not need to implicate that on me. I don't desire, like, and then the response is always, being a woman is how you feel. Being a woman is how you dress, how you present yourself. And one person even asked me, what is the difference between me and you other than a period and giving birth? And I was like, one of my most popular videos was me replying, that was the most masculine thing you could possibly say, because that means you don't know what those mean at all.
right. Like, you have self-owned.
No woman would ever say, the only difference between me and a man is menstruating and giving birth. Like, you wouldn't make them these minute little things that are a part of me, and that's the only difference between me and you. You clearly have never experienced any of those things. And so, I mean, there's no insult or hate in acknowledging exactly what you are. You are a trans person. You don't need to say, I'm a cis person, and then say that trans women are women. We're not playing that. I'm not doing that game. We're going to sit in real definitions. Definitions matter.
Yeah. You can read the ingredients on a candy bar and never eat it, and you will never know it as well as somebody who has opened the wrapper and eaten it, right? Like, I know that these are qualities of a woman, and that's it. That's the only thing separating me from you. The only thing separating me from being able to lactate are these 5 different pills and chemicals that are somehow going to activate the memories, right? Like, there's people that think that way. I think that is, it's like the next phase of subverting what it means to be a person, right? Because it goes beyond just men and women in general, right? You have like the furry community and all these things. Like, you're now dissolving not just societal mechanisms and infrastructure, you're trying to dissolve biology, right? And you're perverting what it is that we are completely and totally. Again, this is I arrive mentally back at nihilism. All is permissive. I can be tomorrow, I'm going to identify as a dog, and then the next day I'm going to identify as X, Y, and Z, whatever it is I'm going to do.
And I have to say this, I hate to interrupt you,
No,
but
you're
I
fine,
have
please.
to let you know the new addition to the LGBT ABCDE, you know, the
EFG.
whole thing, is an M. Do you know what the M stands for?
Is it minor attracted persons? Is that what it is? Yeah. PDFs.
Yeah, because they don't want to be called. Am I able to say the word on here?
Yeah,
I
go
want to
ahead.
make sure I can. I don't want to
Humble,
get
yeah.
you demonetized or anything. Because, you know, some of these things, it's like if you say it, boom, you're demonetized or something. They don't want to be called pedophiles. They think pedophile holds too much weight. And so
Yes, it
and
does.
so we need to be called
Right.
minor attracted persons in order to step away from the stigma. And my takeaway from that is that we need to bring back experiencing shame
Oh, yeah.
in this world. There's no shame. There's no shame in what you're doing and how you're acting and how you're conducting yourself. And so there's one quote, I forget how it goes, but it essentially means that you're never ashamed and you're always offended. And that's exactly what we're dealing with. You're always offended, but you never feel shame for what you're doing or what you're experiencing.
what's
You're
offending
offended
you?
by someone calling you a man, but you feel no shame in being a man in a dress. That's the disconnect that we're experiencing right now, and it's really, really scary to watch, and it's bleeding into everything, right? Because now we're allowing someone's identity to determine what restroom they go into, what locker room they go into, all of these things. And if you aren't inclusive, if you aren't tolerant, you aren't a good person. That's where that virtue comes in. And what I find so interesting about the word tolerance is the fact that in the actual definition of tolerance, at the very end of it, it says, even if you don't agree, even in tolerance, there is a lack of agreeance in there. It is simply allowing someone to exist despite the fact that you don't agree. To tolerate someone isn't to agree. It's not agreeance. It's not forced agreeance.
Right.
Tolerance is allowing someone to exist, meaning it goes in both directions. If I want to exist as someone that is not going to call a man in a beard and a dress a woman, the tolerance from you comes from you allowing me to exist that way, even though we don't agree on this topic. And that's where the disconnect is.
It's not tolerance
there's
anymore.
a utopia to tolerance. It's really just forced agreeance from one direction. It's kind of like when it comes to, we're not going to talk about politics at Christmas, Brianna. No, it's really just everyone else is going to talk about politics at Christmas, and Brianna's just going to be reading White Guilt in the corner. But that was my political stance at Thanksgiving this year, was just reading White Guilt by Shelby Steele in the corner, while everyone else was talking about politics. Because if I started talking about politics, it would be a huge rage out, and then why did you talk about politics, right? So that's just the world that we live in, is that if you don't agree, you're a problem and you're not tolerant, when really tolerance is supposed to go both ways.
Yeah. It's
It
not
is.
tolerance anymore. It's compliance. And that's the point.
Yes.
It is.
Yep. There's
And I
no
think
principles,
It's important
but adhere
to
to
jump
it.
in here with the old saying, right? Like, what you tolerate
Please do, yeah.
today, you'll accept tomorrow, and then what you
Yeah.
accept today, you'll be forced to celebrate tomorrow. Which really is just a long way of saying the slippery slope principle. But it's like we were talking all the way back in 2018. Anybody that was like looking ahead automatically saw, if you start letting, with the when the bathroom issue came up in North Carolina, I remember, because I was still stationed down there, and it's when Target flipped its policy, was like around the same time. And anybody that was looking forward is like, if you do this now, you're gonna have them trying to push pedophilia in 5 years. Everybody was like, you're insane.
Yeah.
What, you tell me then why they're trying to go into the other bathroom.
Right.
You tell me why, like what's behind it. And you made such a good point earlier, Brianna, like you like edged around it. But I really do think that the problem with most individuals that end up falling into this specific line of thinking when they start heading down the trans ideology is that type of person has an intrinsic hate of themselves. Because why wouldn't then why would, if you can't accept who you are, first of all, if the binary doesn't exist, why do you need to change your genitalia to look like the other? You're telling me the binary doesn't exist, so then why do you have to change it?
Why are you affirming gender if gender doesn't exist?
Well, that's why they want you to call yourself a cis woman, because you're now no longer what you actually are, because then they see what they wish they could be. And so if they convince you to call yourself something other than that, then maybe they'll hate themselves a little less.
Right.
And one thing that they say so often is we attract, you guys are going to laugh at this, but we attract the same men. I get the same men, all of this stuff. I know.
Bullshit.
I know. But it is something that is said, and I'm sure there are some husbands in this world that are living a life on the edge in the background. But honestly, that just goes to show what a man they are, that they have dumbed all of womanhood down into who can I attract and who can I get from another woman? How can I get a man from her? This whole territorial thing, it's not feminine at all. This whole thing of like, how can I get, like, it's all about just what I can get sexually, who I can attract sexually, what I can get. And they think, oh, I became a woman, so that must mean that I'm now able to attract every man, when that is just not even true for women. Like,
right,
there's plenty of people that
preference
like, everyone has a preference. Like,
right.
There's people that would never prefer me, and there's people that would see me and think that I'm absolutely incredible. There's always a preference. Every man does not want every woman. So this whole it's all skewed stereotypes. It's not actually turning into anything. It's not rooted in reality. But I always challenge the idea of, you are literally a person that thinks they are something that is not real. That is a mental disorder. If I was sitting here thinking that there was like a little girl on fire in the corner, I would maybe comfort you in that moment, but I would also get you some help. Yeah. Because you're thinking something is happening that is not real, and you're mutilating your body in order to achieve that. That is a mental disorder, and up until 2015, it was one in the DSM-5.
Yes.
It is categorically a mental disorder. And, if I have anxiety, if I have depression, I'm going to say it. So I don't see why it's such an insult to say something that obviously is. And what's interesting is they think it's oppressive to say that it's a mental disorder. But even in the DSM-5, the only solution to gender dysphoria was to transition. It is supported to transition, but it acknowledges the fact that you have a problem, but the only solution is that, and that's fine. But there's an issue there, and it needs to be diagnosed correctly. You can't just say that you're something and not see what the root cause of this obvious trauma, something's happened here that's caused this shift to happen in your brain to where you literally think you were born in the wrong body. That is not a normal thing to say or experience.
No.
When in the spirit of fighting back definitions, this is one of those areas where I think conservatives ceded ground when, like, there was no reason to. I don't even use the word transition, because that is to lend credence to an idea that I'm acknowledging that what you're doing is changing your gender. It does not. So I like to be very specific when I say, listen, you can cosmetically alter your body. Yeah. But that doesn't make you a woman now. Just because it looks like the thing, it's never going to act like the thing, because you don't have the the biology to make it work. You don't have the nerve endings. And not to get too far down the rabbit hole, my wife and I were having a big conversation about this the other day. But a lot of people don't know, because those who are paid to encourage, no, there's no oops, I'm being very specific. Those who are paid to encourage them to seek this type of treatment are never going to tell them, right? If you put a young man, a boy, on puberty blocking hormones, exogenous hormones, prior to him going through puberty, the likelihood of him ever being able to have an orgasm throughout the rest of his life is in like the high percentages, 80 up until like 90%, is taken away from him. because you did that before he went through puberty. Like, you already have robbed him of something. Maybe he was having that issue when he was a young man, but maybe he would have grown out of it when he became a teenager or an adult, because he experienced some of the things it is to be masculine, and was, then he, came to accept himself for who he was, right? But now you've taken that away from a young adolescent who could never even fathom the sacrifice that they're making for this thing in the moment. We don't let kids get tattoos. We don't let them drink alcohol. We don't let them take drugs. We don't let them drive cars. But we'll sure take them.
We don't even let them get in a tanning bed in California under the age of 21.
Yeah. And then even as an adult, last thing, and I'll hand it back to you, Brandon, but even as an adult, if you go through these cosmetic surgeries, right? If a man cosmetically alters himself to appear to be a woman, like I said, it may look like the thing. It's not going to act like the thing. You're never going to experience sexual pleasure the way a woman can, because it's not going to receive it that way. You don't have the nerve endings for it. It's not going to be stimulating to you. And in the same way, if you're a woman that tries to alter herself to appear to be a man, that thing's not going to act like that. Mm-hmm. It's not going to get stimulated that way. It's not going to be pleasurable to you. So it's all this giant big lie that everybody has told themselves, and we as a society have been forced to tolerate, comply with, right, Brandon, to your point. And we're supposed to pretend and go along with this thing when it's like, I know for a fact behind closed doors you are suffering. I know for a fact that you are now a slave to the medical system. Like, I watched that episode, what was that show of, about that young boy Jazz or whatever?
Oh, yeah.
And the mom was like forcing him to use a dilator.
That's
and was
crazy.
Basically on camera saying, if you don't do this, like, I'm going to forcibly penetrate you, because that's what the doctor said. Can we take a moment to just think about how wild that is?
Yeah, with Jazz, her mom said, or his mom said that that they started showing signs of wanting to transition at 2 years old.
Yeah.
I don't buy that.
2 years old. These are parents with mental disorders that are imposing them on children. And I'll also add, when it comes to the last time I told a trans person that you are affecting the sexual pleasure of a future adult when you transition children, is they said, why are you thinking about children having sex?
Why are you thinking about children?
That's ironic.
Genitalia.
That's ironic.
But that's the kind of responses you get. Is just, why do you care so much about children experiencing sexual satisfaction? I'm like, no, I'm defending them as an adult. Like, we're all adults here, right? Wouldn't you like to experience that as an adult?
This person is going to mature.
And yeah, it's going to progress. You're going to get older, and these things are going to be important to you. Even Blair White, she's talked about how she simply does not experience sexual pleasure at all, and she does not experience arousal at all. And I say she simply because, like, I see, and I mean, one thing I will say is the doctor did a good job. Okay.
I don't even know who that is.
Did a great job.
Listen,
I honestly have a hard time saying he. When I see Blair White, I have a hard time saying he, just because great job done there. But they've even talked about all of those things, and the fact that people still attack Blair for those reasons is insane to me. And even when it comes to all the detransitioners, all of these kids that transitioned as children and now they've become adults, it's gone up by 35%, and it's just going to keep on going as all of these trans kids grow up and realize, hey, maybe I didn't know what I was talking about when I was 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. And now these are people that are stuck in bodies. It's actually incredibly sad to see people that were healthy boys, for example, and did everything it took. Their parents allowed them to do what it takes to become a girl, and now they are trying to become a boy again, and now they look like a trans man.
A Frankenstein.
Because they skipped over puberty, and they look like a girl now. And now they're trying to become exactly who they were born as. And they sound like a girl, they look like a girl, and now they're trying to be exactly what they were born as, and they'll never be the same.
Yeah.
It's incredibly sad.
It makes me think of castratos, right? If you're familiar with a
Mm-hmm.
castrato, those guys had their testicles removed when they were kids so that they could sing the way that they were, and they had all of these weird physical features because of that, like the testosterone naturally and all the other things that go on with you having balls, like that affects who you are eventually, you know. And yeah, if the biology didn't matter, then cutting somebody's balls off so they could sing a certain way when they're an adult wouldn't be necessary. It would just happen, you know. It's a total refutation and what's the word I'm looking for? Refusal to acknowledge that science is real, which is funny coming from the community who tried to tell you for years that you were a science denier for a bunch of different things. It's like, well, all right,
You know?
it's only subjective, right? It's only when it serves your purpose that you get to throw
a
these things
narrative.
out. That's it, right?
Yeah.
It's a social contagion is what I call it. I think that's like all these kids, like it was cool back in, you know, when I was in high school or middle school to wear Jinko jeans or whatever, you know. It's the same thing. It's like, man, have you transitioned yet? You know what I mean? Like, or whatever.
Yeah.
But one of the
It's the cool new thing.
it is it's a social contagion the same way. One of the last things I wanted to ask you is earlier we had talked about social media as a driver for a lot of this stuff. And this is a conversation we've had on this podcast before too, about how the internet is done around the world, because the internet in America is not the same internet, for example, in China. Okay. Their great firewall and what the CCP allows their people to see on their phones or whatever is vastly different. And this is one of those things that spurned the whole conversation about TikTok and about how its algorithm affects Americans, right? And where all that data goes and all these things, because that data fuels that algorithm. But if the question is in you know, diagnosing that social media is such a problem that it creates these social contagions and drives behavior, which then drives outcomes, then what is to be done about it, right? Is it revamping the way algorithms are done? Algorithms are personal to you, but do you need to have more control over that algorithm? Is it the introduction of governmental control over what that algorithm is allowed to show, right? Is there, you know, government regulation on top of business, or do things just become illegal? Like, you know, in the CCP, certain things are illegal, and, you know, they don't have specific problems that Americans do. They have a whole host of other problems, right? But so do we trade, right, the liberty online, as it were, even though there really isn't total liberty? We experienced quite a bit of that over the last couple of years. If we say and can agree, right, that social media is a problem and it drives all of these behavioral issues, then okay, well, if something is genuinely that much of a problem, then you should do something about it. But if the solution for it is to turn it off, then that requires force, because turning it off means that, well, this private industry that somebody else owns is the government stepping in and telling a private citizen or a private corporation that they can't do something, right? So we've arrived back at what again is like what sounds like another impasse. How do you solve this problem if you can't convince people to take personal accountability? And we're not just disagreeing, you know, ideologically, but we're also disagreeing ontologically on basically everything. It's just like this. I agree. This social media, the internet, has seemed to be what's sped up all of this dissolving of culture here in the United States. But our culture sort of stands in the way of getting rid of it because we believe in a free market, right? So how do we remedy that dichotomy? You know, how, like, I don't expect you to have a solution, but just introducing the topic into the forum for discussion, right? It's something I think about and worry about a lot, especially when I think about my children growing up. Like, what is the America of 2040?
And that's exactly where I was going to start, was with children. I think a lot of what was happening with TikTok, a lot of the parents that were coming forward about both TikTok and AI, if we're going to loop AI into things, was the effect on children and how children are exposed to so much. Since we have so many controls when it comes to children, I do think we do need to have more controls when it comes to what they absorb online and what they have access to. When it comes to social media, I don't have a solution into exactly how they would do it. I'm not an app developer. But I do think that there needs to be more restriction. There's too many cases of children, not only when it comes to sexual predators, even though there's an exorbitant amount of cases of, cases where there are children being, there's predators coming after them on the internet. But also what seems to be this almost satanic spiral that AI takes children down to suicide. It's very scary, the stories that I've heard. And so I think there needs to be more controls around what children get into. But then it always ends up pulling back into parenting.
Yes.
Parents being more involved. But at the same time, there are some things that even with all of the parental controls turned on, somehow children are able to either get into it or they're exposed to it involuntarily. So I do think that there needs to be more restrictions for children. 100%. We restrict so much with them. I think we should be able to restrict more when it comes to the internet. When it comes to adults, that's where it gets very hard. Just because, like you said, we have our liberties, we have our free speech. We should be able to do and absorb and see whatever we want. But I do think that if something is posing as a risk to chaos, there can be some measure of a filter there. For example, when it comes to AI, the depths that it's going into, you may have seen what happened with Grok recently. Have you seen what happened with Grok recently?
Recently being as in like maybe this week?
With Elon Musk? Yes.
No, I have not. What happened?
So his Grok AI, what happened was that it is able to produce images. You may even already catch on to what's going on here. It's able to produce images of people. And what is now circling on Grok is images of children, very inappropriate. And so when it comes to that, I do think that we need more standards when it comes to what AI is, because that is a crime. And two, disgusting.
Yes.
And just what we're able to have access to when it comes to other children on the internet is important to me. I think more adults need to have more shield when it comes to getting to children on the internet. But when it comes to what we're doing as far as politics is concerned, that's hard because I deserve a right to my speech. You deserve your right to yours. And so does the left. They have a right to their speech. So that's where I find myself stumped. There are some countries that have required that you have a degree or some semblance of education in the subject that you are trying to talk about on the internet. I can't remember if that was China. I honestly don't remember exactly which one.
You must be this smart to speak. I kind of like that.
Yeah,
actually.
you must be, and that's where it gets...
You want to talk politics
if we're
Instagram,
trying to
pass this
only
test.
have qualified people speaking, that's a problem. But I also think this other side of that problem is the fact that there's so many unqualified people speaking.
And
it's spreading
people
so
still have
much.
Agendas.
It's so much misinformation. There's so much of just anything anywhere going around. It's hard to say exactly how we'd be able to do it constitutionally and respecting our rights as Americans. But at the end of the day, these are private companies that are running these apps. They can and have put restrictions on what can be said and what can be done. So I don't see why, if we were to propose certain restrictions, they wouldn't be able to do it unless the main reason I would think that they wouldn't be able to do certain things is if it wouldn't make them money or it wouldn't fulfill the wishes of those that are truly running these companies, which I think we can all connect the dots on who those people are. They're not Mark Zuckerberg. They're people way higher up than him, and people the lizard people, precisely. Yeah, my favorite conspiracy theory. That stuff is hilarious. But there's people that are using us as pawns with social media. It's 100% obvious when you just scroll on your timeline. It's obvious, and I do wish that we could get more of a handle on it, but I think it's fulfilling its purpose right now, and I don't see it changing anytime soon, which is unfortunate.
Well, you have to.
I mean, Elon Musk has already said, like, his idea is he wants to push transhumanism, right? To the idea where he wants to put the chip right in your brain. He's been a proponent of this since the very beginning, which is why I've always said, like, hey, can we pump the brakes on Elon Musk being this giant cultural hero all of a sudden because he supported Donald Trump for a little bit? Everybody was like, Elon's the greatest things. And I'm like, he's still trying to put chips in people's brains, people. And, like, once you have Twitter in your head, I mean, like, can we see where this is going, right? It's not just
the robots
shot,
as well.
Bro. Then it's going to be just get the chip, bro. If you just don't get just get the chip, bro. And then, if you want to have access to these certain places or venues, people are going to think I sound crazy, but you want to have access to these certain places and venues, you got to be chipped to get in here because your digital wallet's in your chip and your digital ID is in your chip now, right? And then
we already have one,
but it's going to be in here, right? And then
it is going to be in here, but I'm talking about the access and being able to get into certain places and
like
pay for certain things, and
But
you
to
need
extrapolate
that at this point.
To the end of the book of Revelation, like, I wish most people could now see the dominoes to where it talks about you're going to get a mark. It's going to be either here, it's going to be here. And if you don't have it, then you can't buy, you can't sell, you can't be in public. Like, you're going to be extracized from society.
The first time I saw what reminded me of the mark was the palm reader in Whole Foods, being able to pay with your palm. That's when I was like, this isn't sitting well with me. There's something about it that doesn't feel right.
I agree.
It's going a little too far. I don't like the idea of my palm being able to pay for things for me. Same thing with Face ID.
Those Amazon stores. Yeah, they just track your face.
It's getting weird.
I think you have to de-incentivize anything, right? To kill it now, right? Instagram and Snapchat most famously have faced several lawsuits when it comes to mental health in kids. And here's where you like start to enter the realm where like the government can act, because the government is there to protect the people, right? That's one of their roles. And it's demonstrable that social media is bad for not just the brains of adults, but especially for the developing brain of a child. And one of the lawsuits centered around filters, and then it also centered around likes and comments on on photos on Instagram specifically, and then Snapchat. And that this evidence essentially was presented to Meta and Snapchat about what was going on and the negative mental health implications that this was having for kids that were on these platforms. And they said, well, can't you guys just turn this stuff off, right? And one of the things they suggested was, well, Snapchat can recognize from facial features that you're a female on the app, and the filters it suggests are beautification filters. And this is like sort of the same argument back in the 90s about fashion magazines and women creating an impossible standard and making you feel like you're inferior because you're always seeing this perfect image of what a woman should look like. And the second you open Snapchat, your features are automatically corrected by this beautification app. It makes people feel like shit, and especially kids. Well, they said no, they're not going to do that. They're not going to do anything like that. And initially, Mark Zuckerberg said that they would change the whole like thing, and maybe can you just turn the likes off? Like these kids are associating their whole identity and their self-worth with how many likes their photos are getting, because they see some people get a lot and they don't get any, and this is like seriously detrimental to their health. And they said, yeah, at first, and then he walked it back, and then it became a toggle on and off that you could do. But who the fuck is going to turn off the like function when it feels good to get them? So you have to, I think that is sort of the pathway, right? Is if you're looking at it from that standpoint and acknowledge that this is causing mental health issues, and this is an actual medical issue that is now being exacted on young people specifically, then you can go after and disincentivize these things that drive engagement, right, in an unhealthy way, right? They're already manipulating engagement anyway, so to pretend like they are pearl clutching at the suggestion of manipulating it in other ways is ironic and hypocritical. But that's it. You have to go after these little mechanisms that way, and quantifying it through medical science or things like that. The things that you can exhibit are actual problems. Like these are those pathways, and then we have laws in place that protect kids online. They're supposed to, even though Meta is one of the number one places for PDFs to go meet kids, and they do it all the time. It's one of these things like Roblox or things like Telegram or Discord or all these other places that exist for people to get online and start interacting with one another. But it's enforcement. No law is good if it's not enforced. And it's just like so many other problems in our culture. If you would just enforce the law that already exists, then this problem wouldn't be here. But you're not. You're not enforcing those things. So I think that it's maybe not even a ratcheting up of regulations. It's just the enforcement of standards that are already present. I can't post a photo of something online because it gets taken down because it looks violent or it has a bullet in it or a gun in it or whatever. But then I open up my phone, or I'm on the Reels feed, and some Instagram chick I don't follow, right? I am now looking at her half naked butthole. It's like, okay, well, that's totally fine, but I can't post a photo of a gun, or something like that, so enforcing the standards that already exist, I think is a solution. But anyway, I don't know. The solution, I think, ultimately is personal accountability and parenting and all these other things. But at the end of the day, most parents are addicted to social media just as much as kids want to be on it. So.
Yep. Their kids on the iPad and the parents on the couch scrolling as well. So
Correct.
it's really hard, especially since modeling is so important in parenting.
Yeah.
Kid sees mom on the phone all the time. Kid is on his iPad all the time.
Yeah, and wants it.
It's the perfect storm.
It is. Well, Brianna, thank you for your time tonight. I really, really appreciate it. You just started your own podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, it was a lot of fun to talk to you. I'm looking forward to being able to talk about some conspiracy stuff maybe at some point after you finish Chaos. We can talk about.
Very excited.
We could talk about that. Where can people find you? And we'll drop all that information in the show notes when the episode drops, and it will drop this Saturday. So just go and let everybody know where they can find you, and we'll square it away.
Well, you can find me on Instagram at Black Card Declined. On Instagram and Facebook, you can find me there. And also, you can find me on YouTube as well. And anywhere else that you watch podcasts, it's the Black Card Declined podcast. You can find me there, and I'd hope to find some fun new friends over there. I did just drop my podcast a couple weeks ago, so we are still in the new phase. But if you want to be one of the OGs that grow with me, it'd be awesome to have some of you guys over there as well.
You got Black Card Decline merch coming?
Yes, I do. I do have merch coming. It's very exciting. I'm also going to be starting a book club community as well.
Ooh, I like that.
Hopefully. Yes, that's me. Thank you. In January, at the end of January, I'm going to be dropping my book club community as well. It's going to be a combination of mentorship and holding each other accountable to reading some books if anyone has a hard time doing that, especially in today's day and age. Come on and join us, Chris. That'd be awesome. So
he's got a reading list.
It's like
you do have a list. I remember that. Yeah. So if anyone wants to join that'll be dropping in January. So feel free to follow me and be along for the journey. It'll be a good time.
Can I make a merch suggestion?
Please do.
You should get cards that say Black Card and then have like a slash through it, and then you could just sell a black card that doesn't work. It could look like a credit card and everything.
That would be epic.
Yeah, Black Card
That would
Decline.
actually be awesome. I'm gonna write that down.
If it comes to fruition, I just want one. You don't have to. I don't need any of the royalties, but I just want one. You know what I'm saying?
No.
Forever.
Hey, I actually was
Consider
given a
it
black
done.
card one time by my friend. What's up, Quentin? In the military.
That means you're a part of the cookout.
I was
That's
invited to
amazing.
barbecue forever, dude. That's it. My hole was
That's
punched.
awesome.
Right.
You guys are invited to mine as well. You can
Thank you.
well. You can
I
definitely
love
be a part of the
barbecuing.
cookout.
Epic.
Bring a dish.
Well-
It's a combination of Cuban and your classic African American barbecue every time.
Yes.
So you guys are absolutely
The
invited.
mac and cheese, dude.
Yeah.
I'm here for it. Yes,
It's
absolutely.
amazing.
Mm.
It's amazing.
Brandon
Well-
also makes a fantastic brisket.
I appreciate
He doesn't
that.
want to brag about it.
Ooh.
I do a lot of
I don't
Smoked
doubt it.
meats. Yeah. Typical middle-aged white guy stuff. You know what I mean? Tri-tips, briskets, pork butts. You know, that's me, man.
Smoked wings.
Smoked
I
wings,
bet you
yep.
there's smoked wings
Chicken
in there.
thighs, all
Yep.
that stuff. You know it, man. I got that Traeger
Yeah.
going.
It's like
You know
it's that meme. It's got the 4 pictures, right?
Mhm.
It's like guns, the lawn,
World War
smoked
II history.
meats, World War II history, cars,
Yeah.
like whatever.
Right.
It's like
Teddy Roosevelt.
yeah, dudes are literally
Dude.
turned 35.
Do
and-
you know
and
how
choosing
big of a
one these
TR
to be
fan
their
I am?
personality forever.
Like, yeah,
I've caught on.
Yes.
I've caught on.
Dude,
Yeah.
Chris is probably sick of listening to me talk about Teddy Roosevelt. Anyway, all right. Your stuff, your info will be in the show notes. You guys, please go over there and check it out.
Thank you,
Go and
guys.
sub to Black Card Declined. It was really fun talking to you. I look forward to doing other podcasts with you in the future. And yeah,
be great.
we'll stay in touch. I hope you have a good weekend.
Absolutely.
We're coming up on it. So
Thank you so much, you guys.
problem.
You're awesome.
just
See you next time.
absolutely just hang out once I hit stop, and we'll wrap up.